welcome back to another episode of the Pittsburgh Sports Castle Podcast. I'm your host, Rachael Kriger. This week we have a special guest, but he's a staff writer, so it's not like the last couple shows where we've had special outside guests. This week, my friend Owen Krepps is here, and I mean, if there's a superlative that Owen should win, it's most patience, because we have been trying to plan this podcast for like a week now, and shocker, my life is crazy busy. And Owen's just like, I'll do whatever. I'm around. So, so how are you doing? Happy New Year, my friend.
Yeah. How are you? I'm all right. Pretty much just getting back to school here at Robert Morris, and I don't know, just trying to get into the swing of things with some normality, trying to get back to an NHL season here.
Aren't we all trying to get back to normality? That would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so we're not talking about the Steelers because I think we all need a couple weeks to,
Yeah. One thing I will say about the Steelers, though, is that, well, I'm easily more of a hockey fan than I am a football fan. So I would like to welcome any outlier like Steelers fans that are lost and they don't know what to root for anymore because they were expecting a long playoff run. The Penguins are always welcoming new fans, and given the fact that we are the best team in Pittsburgh, we're more than happy to accept depressed Steelers fans like we do every year.
I love the subtle jab with like we do every year.
Great.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally deserved, but that's not why we're here to talk about Penguins, like you said, because the season for the Penguins starts up here
tomorrow night, 5:30.
This week it actually starts. It starts 5:30.
Philly.
It's crazy how because of COVID, obviously everybody's had to adjust their schedules and like kind of smush together their off seasons and everything. And like hockey's back, folks. So we have a really great preview show coming up. But I know you wanted to talk overall about recent news. But before we do that, just kind of a little outline that Owen has here is that, there's a 56 game schedule for the NHL season. There's no preseason games. There's going to be 4 new divisions. The Scotia North Division, Honda West Division, Discover Central Division, Mass Mutual East Division, and then it's a typical Stanley Cup playoff bracket. So just kind of, give me your thoughts on some of the overall recent news, including a gold medal as well, too.
Yeah, for World Juniors. Yeah, the United States won World Juniors. Side note, though, the Penguins didn't really have any prospects in World Juniors. However, just for the overall start of the season, Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, like the two main guys head of the NHL, Bettman being the commissioner, they pretty much have tried to make this season be as normal as it possibly could. And it's kind of sad that 3 times within Bettman's tenure have we had a shortened season now. 2 were because of lockouts, and this one, of course, is for COVID. An 82 game season will be reduced this year, only a 56 game season. The divisions are probably the thing that's a little bit non-traditional, and the thing that's probably going to be, the most different is the new divisions and how the schedule is worked out. We're going to be playing mostly like baseball style games where we're going to be playing like 2 to 3 games against a single team in like a week or so. So it'll be like mini series like they do in the MLB, which will be interesting because, like, as I mentioned, like before on my YouTube channel, like some of these divisions are really, really not deep at all. Like, for instance, the Tampa Bay Lightning, who just won the Stanley Cup, are in the same division as the Detroit Red Wings, who had the least points in the NHL. What happens when they play Detroit 8 times in the season, which they will? That's an easy 16 points right there towards the playoffs. So I really think it'll be interesting. Of course, the divisions are the North, which is an all-Canadian team, or all Canadian division, the only division that has 7 teams instead of 8. The Penguins are in the East Division, and then there's the West Division and the Central Division. The Central Division is pretty interesting. That's the division where the Lightning are in. But yeah, it'll overall be pretty interesting. The NHL is losing money right now. Just everyone's losing money right now. So yeah, to pretty much try and patch that hole and be able to try and get a season going, they got this 56 game schedule going on.
Yeah, everybody's losing money is is an understatement, for sure. So I have to lament the United States beating my home country of Russia. Sad swan song for me, but congratulations, of course, to the United States for winning the World Juniors over Canada. Obviously a great tournament, and no major, COVID outbreaks. So that's, awesome job. Yeah, awesome job. So let's get into the NHL then. You kind of talked about these new divisions with the shortened schedule. Are you surprised that they're not doing, because I know the NHL has tossed around the idea of doing
bubbles,
a couple different hub cities.
Yeah,
are you surprised that they're not doing that?
Apparently in the board of directors meeting they had, they didn't even bring up the idea of a bubble because they knew players and coaches and owners were not going to really be up for having that. The only thing we know right now about controlled crowd disposal is that there will be no fans in January in the entire month, which is kind of expected given the fact that we're starting the season halfway through the month already. There will be a couple outdoor games, more than there usually is, and there'll be a couple season series that are going to be played completely outdoors, which is also interesting. But a thing that I don't have the hugest platform to vent on here, but the thing that we all need to accept as not just hockey fans, but as sports fans overall, is that positive tests and exposures to COVID, they're going to happen. People are getting up in arms about how, for instance, the San Jose Sharks are not able to practice or might not play games in San Jose due to COVID, being down there in California. I know the Dallas Stars, it just came out today that they have 17 players on the team that have COVID right now. There was even a scare with the Penguins where they canceled a practice, I think Saturday, just to a possible exposure. People are gonna, take the news like that and kind of just freak out about it, just overall being like, oh, well, what if Crosby gets COVID and he's out? And what if, the Penguins lose every game now and it spreads throughout the team? It's gonna happen, though, is what I want to say, is just that, this is gonna happen. It happened in the NFL, and it's gonna happen until we get a perfect vaccine. And yeah, that's really, really it. But as for overall, training camp wrapped up yesterday. And the only players that were not in the lineup were Zach Aston-Reese, who was injured, and then Kasperi Kapanen, who was not able to come over from Finland yet due to a work visa from with COVID and everything. He had to quarantine and et cetera. It was a mess, but he's back now. And yeah, opening night tomorrow night.
Hard to believe. And you've got your line combinations in your depth chart out here. You were just talking a little bit about some of the guys who, might not, be there right away. They might not have the biggest impact right away, but you've got your depth chart here. So just kind of walk us through and give me your key points for what you think is going to make the Penguins successful this year.
Yeah, well, the lines that the Penguins rolled with in training camp were Gensel, Crosby, Rodriguez, who came back after we acquired him at the deadline. We didn't sign him immediately as a free agent. And then we signed him to a bargain deal. And then Zucker, Malkin, Rust on your second line. McCann, free agent signing Jankowski, and then Brandon Tanev on the third. Lafferty, Bluger, Sevier on the fourth. Dumoulin, Letang, first pairing as always. Matheson, Marino, and then Pedersen, Ceci. Jari, your starter. DeSmith, the backup. Kasperi Kapanen not in the lineup. Neither is Aston-Reese, as I mentioned. and then Ricola and Ruedel as your spares on defense. This is what the Penguins rolled with in training camp. To be honest, it's okay. I'm not a huge fan of it, but again, I'm not the coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins or the general manager. Jankowski intrigues me as the third line center. He was a failed prospect for the Calgary Flames, another failed 2012 first round draft pick, which we'll get to later. There's a cool tidbit of information I want to tell you about with that. But the thing that I'll just preach about the overall structure of the lineup is that the Penguins have a really good top six overall. If you say that Kapanen is going to be a top six player, which Rutherford says that's why he acquired him. He acquired him to be a top six player. Then the Penguins have Crosby and Malkin, who will be good, if not great, like they always are. Jake Gensel and Brian Rust, who are phenomenal wingers that have paid their dues in the Penguins organization and have their name on Stanley Cups. Jason Zucker, who was a great trade line acquisition that fits perfectly in the Penguins system, and then Kasperi Kapanen. So that's a really good top six. The problem, though, is that the bottom six, which are your next two lines, kind of weak for me. You look at the Stanley Cup winning teams in past years. You had Jordan Staal there. You had Ruslan Fedotenko and Max Talbot and Matt Cook and Tyler Kennedy, and not to mention Hagelin Benino Kessel in 2016. That's a Stanley Cup winning third line. I don't think McCann, Jankowski, and Tanev is at that level yet. But I think the main X factor for the Penguins this upcoming season is Jared McCann. He really needs to come into his own. He's still young. There were rumors in the offseason that he was going to get traded. He was a restricted free agent. But Rutherford signed him to a prove yourself deal. Hopefully he can be able to solidify himself as a center. I do not like the fact that he's on the left wing right now because I want him to play center. He's a natural center, so I really hope that, he can solidify the core because Teddy Bluger is our fourth line center. That's the area that I'm not worried about, is Teddy Bluger hopefully being paired up with Brandon Tanev on the fourth line again. But yeah, that's really the area that I have for concerns. The Penguins' third line and bottom six. Goaltending wise, I'm not too concerned on, though. And then the taxi squad, which is kind of a new addition this year. You get 4 players to pretty much have as your. They're not scratches. I asked Seth Rohrbach of the Tribune Review about this on Twitter today, and I was confused what the difference is between a scratch player and a taxi squad player. So from my understanding, a scratch player is someone like Zach Aston-Reese, who's injured, or Jussi Ricola and Chad Ruedel, who are your defensive spares. They are on the team. They're on the 23-man roster, but the taxi squad, they're not officially on the 23-man roster, so they would have to be somewhat promoted to get into the lineup, because it's not like it used to be because of COVID. You can't just call someone up from Wilkes-Barre and have them play that night because, of course, you got to quarantine and all that stuff. So basically what they're doing in the NHL this year is having a set of 4 players and then as many goalies as you want to be kind of an emergency-like player, which, side note, I don't know what that does to those players' developments because they would only be playing in practices instead of just games. But the 4 players that made it for the Penguins were Drew O'Connor, Anthony Angelo, Frederick Gaudreau, and Pierre-Olivier Joseph, with then of Alex Diorio and Maxim Lagacé as your goaltenders. I think O'Connor might sneak into the lineup, but yeah. So, yeah, pretty much that's my ramble about kind of the training camp lines so far, what Sullivan's put together so far, and what I think the Penguins need from that bottom 6.
And you said you're not really worried about the goaltending situation. They've got Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith. They obviously, Matt Murray, he did his purpose. He, went out with his head held high, no bad blood. What makes you so confident between Jarry and DeSmith, and which one do you think gets the nod?
Oh, Jarry will get the nod no matter what. But it is a shortened season, though, so DeSmith will probably play a decent amount of games. He's a great backup. The reason I'm not really worried about goaltending is because I don't think it's an area you really need to worry about in the NHL anymore. You don't need a good goalie specifically. You need a goalie that's hot. Jordan Binnington, Matt Murray, heck, go back, Cam Ward. Those are goalies that they're not the best goalies in the world, but they were hot in the playoffs and hot in stretches throughout the regular season. Tim Thomas, there's another one. You don't need to have, a franchise goaltender like Martin Brodeur anymore in this current stage of the NHL. You need to have a solid goaltender that's able to go on runs there. Tristan Jarry was an NHL All-Star last year because he went on those runs and he carried the Penguins in stretches when they needed it the most. It's not that much about me even being worried about Jarry overall. It's just the fact that I think goaltending, and I may get some slack for saying this, but I don't think goaltending is the most important position like it used to be anymore. I really don't. You can have a solid defensive core and just be able to win games because of it. Look at the Columbus Blue Jackets last season. Jonas Korpisalo came out of nowhere. He was a rookie, and the Blue Jackets played well in front of them. Look at the Dallas Stars in the playoffs. Anton Khudobin, while he was phenomenal, I'm not taking anything away from him. They have a good defensive structure, and I don't know. Like, you can't have a bad goalie. If you have a bad goalie like Sergei Bobrovsky or Jimmy Howard last year, you're doomed. But you don't need an all-star goalie is what I'm trying to say here. You need a good goalie. And the Penguins have that with Tristan Jarry. He's not, a 99 overall on EA Sports. He's like an 80 overall, and that's fine.
Yeah, you need consistency too. I think
Exactly.
there's another one to add in there because consistency is huge. You mentioned these lines. You said that there's really not enough defensive spots. The third line looks weak, but kind of switching over now, you've got pairings confirmed. You've got replacement players coming in for some of the guys who left. So the Penguins, obviously, this is a city that has a lot of success, and this is an organization that has a lot of success. And last year, it seemed like all the dominoes crashed down, and everyone, was lighting their flamethrowers and, getting their picket signs out, and it was madness. So what do the Penguins need to do to have a strong year?
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a loaded question. Just the fact that I don't know. Things have to go right for them. Obviously, injuries last year were a main part of the struggles that the Penguins went through. However, they were able to battle through adversity. I feel like I saw two different teams last year. I felt like I saw that resilient Penguins that were able to only have Teddy Bluger, Marcus Pettersson, and Brandon Tanev be the only players that played in every single game for the Penguins because of injuries. And then in the playoffs, I saw a completely different team that just didn't have the urge anymore to win Stanley Cups. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's okay if the Penguins need a rebuild or a retool. That's completely fine. You're not going to win 7 billion Stanley Cups with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. The point is that we got there in the first place and we got 3 Stanley Cups with them in this era. If the Penguins need to rebuild and retool, kind of like what the Chicago Blackhawks have been doing these past couple of years, maybe unintentionally, but and I'll preach this till the day I die, the Penguins need to stop trading away their draft picks. They have not had a first-round draft pick on the Penguins organization since Sidney Crosby, since Olli Maatta was traded, Kasperi Kapanen was traded, and now he's back, and Samuel Poulin is the other one. Everyone else was either traded in trades to get guys like Phil Kessel, which, again, not blaming that. We got a cup out of them. But some of those picks were also used to trade to get guys like David Perron, Derek Brassard, Ryan Reeves, and Jason Zucker now, and Kasperi Kapanen to get him back. So I really think the Penguins need to do kind of both here. Maybe try and compete for another Stanley Cup, but the thing that the Penguins need the most is prospects. And I mentioned this yesterday in my prospect pyramid that I posted on my YouTube channel, is that the Penguins have one of, if not the worst batch of prospects in the entire league. Samuel Poulin, Nathan Legare, and Pierre-Olivier Joseph are like the only notable names that we have. And that's pretty much how it's going to be for the next couple of years because we've traded away those picks in the future too. We don't even have our 2021 first round pick. So I really think that that's the area that the Penguins need to focus on just overall as a franchise. But for the Penguins to have success this year, I mean, they just need to rely on the guys that they've always relied on. I mean, Sidney Crosby will carry this team into the playoffs if it kills him. And I think the Penguins make the playoffs this year, but I don't know what they do in it. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, for sure. For right now, we need, your lines. You have filled out for Sullivan's lines, McCann, Jankowski, Tanev, and then underneath Lafferty, Bluger, and you're gonna have to help me with this name
Sevier,
out.
yeah. Yeah, he was part of the Patrick Hornquist trade. Yeah, those lines, that's pretty much what Sullivan has as the bottom six right now, which for those of you that don't know hockey, the bottom six is your third line and your fourth line. Your top six is your first two lines. Six as in there's six players. So, yeah, that's the area that I think the Penguins need to really fix right now, because that's how you win championships, is with depth. And the Penguins, in my mind, they don't really have that right now.
Owen was talking to me when he said, for those who don't know hockey, by the way. So give us your lines. Who do you think slots in at which place? Why do you think they fit well there? And it could just even be as simple as you mentioned earlier, preferred positions.
Yeah. Well, the Penguins they have no shortage of options for the bottom six, and no team does. There's a lot of players that are going to try and pry their way into the NHL from the minors, from being drafted and things like that. I think the only confirmed things that we have for the bottom six for the Penguins is that Teddy Bluger will be your fourth line center. He was phenomenal last year. And in his first full season, he had like 22 points, I believe. And that's phenomenal as a fourth line center. And then Brandon Tanev will also be there. I want him to be with Teddy Bluger on that fourth line, despite paying $3.5 million to a fourth line player. It may seem a little outlandish, but the chemistry that they had last year could really be useful for some added depth on the fourth line there. And not only did they play on the fourth line together, they played on the penalty kill together, and they even played in overtime. So really impressed by Bluger and Tanev, and I think those are the only two locks we have for the Penguins' bottom six. But there's still four other slots, though, and they could go from guys like McCann, Rodriguez, Jankowski, Drew O'Connor, who impressed in training camp, who was a free agent college signing for the Penguins. I mentioned Samuel Poulin, Sam Lafferty, Zach Aston-Reese may come back from injury. Colton Sevier was added in the offseason. Same with I wish it was Johnny Gaudreau. Same with Frederick Gaudreau, Radim Zoharna, Nathan Legare, Jordan Nolan, and Anthony Angelo, and Sam Militek. There's a lot of names there that the Penguins could reasonably have in your bottom six, but my picks would be Bluger and Tanev. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think the X factor for this season for the Penguins is Jared McCann as your third line center. And I want him as center, and I cannot stress how important that is. If he plays wing, then I feel like he's not playing to his full potential. I can see him as a dominant, strong, young third-line center for the Penguins, and I'm really, really rooting for this kid this year. He's one of the most, I don't know, like he's just a project player that the Penguins have had. He was drafted in the first round by the Canucks, and then he was traded to the Panthers, and then he was traded to the Penguins. He was traded 3 times before he was even 25, so he went from 3 major cities before he, was even 25. So that's crazy for him, and it's probably taken an effect on his development, but I really hope McCann can slot in as the third line center. So right now I have generic forward, left wing, third line. McCann is your third line center, generic forward, right wing, generic for your third line, and then forward on your left wing for the fourth line, and then Bluger and Tanev. So the next spot that I would fill would probably be, I don't even know. I am going to go out on a limb here and say this is, of course, a hypothetical scenario. This isn't going to happen this season probably, but if I were in charge, I would put both Drew O'Connor and Samuel Poulin on the third line with Jared McCann, so you have a really strong, young third line Poulin's 19, McCann's 25 or 26, and Drew O'Connor is 22. As I mentioned, Poulin, one of the only rare first-round draft picks for the Penguins. He's in a queue right now, the QMJHL. He's been tearing it up there. He's showing all the signs of becoming a pretty decent NHL powered forward. And given the fact that, Patrick Hornqvist was traded, Poulin could definitely slot in the next couple of years for the Penguins. Power forwards are really rare in this day and age in the NHL. So O'Connor, he impressed in training camp, so much so that he even was on the Penguins' fourth line just in typical line rushes. So I could definitely see him maybe sneaking up and being this year's surprise player. So the last spot that I have is the left wing on the fourth line, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that with Zach Aston-Reese because he's been there before, and that was kind of the fourth line for the majority of the season with the Penguins last year. Was Aston-Reese, Blueger, and Tanev. However, Sam Lafferty would be my next pick to fill that slot. He's been phenomenal for the Penguins as well. As a solid Wilkes-Barre call-up, I would throw Lafferty in there right now until Aston-Reese is healthy. So overall, the Penguins do not have a strong bottom six. We need someone to step up this season, and I really hope it's Jared McCann, but we'll get to that when I do my predictions later.
And you already answered who your surprise player is going to be, but out of, some guys that, quote unquote, come off of the bench, who do you think is going to be the most impactful substitution player for the Penguins?
Yeah, given the fact that Drew O'Connor made the Penguins taxi squad this year, the Penguins are going to have injuries this year, no question about it. So even if O'Connor does not make the starting lineup tomorrow night, which he probably won't, he will play in the NHL this season, which is crazy because he was just in college last year, 22-year-old from Dartmouth College, and he's apparently, of course, I wish I could be there, but I wasn't at the Penguins training camp, so I just have to take the word of mouth here. Apparently he's been phenomenal in terms of just what the Penguins are looking for from a bottom six player. And for those of you that are expecting him to be, this elite level prospect, he's not. He's a college free agent signing. Think of him as Jimmy Vesey at best. So O'Connor could really help the Penguins out, not only because he's young, he's a good power forward. I think he's 6'3", but because he's on his entry level contract and because the league is always getting younger. And yeah, Drew O'Connor's my pick as that surprise player that I think no doubt about it will play in the NHL this season, maybe a couple games when injuries arrive. But you never know if he'll stick there. And again, the Penguins have prospects and players that come out of nowhere. Jake Gensel was a third rounder. Brian Rust was a third rounder. John Marino was traded for a sixth rounder. So maybe it'll be O'Connor this year.
Let's get into some of your predictions. You've got a lot going on here, and I'm really curious to hear all of your predictions. I hope they're all right. So let's just honestly just go down the list here. I mean, you've got a lot of them, and I think a lot of people are there's going to be people that agree, there's going to be people that disagree, but you've got a lot of substance to your predictions, which is always appreciated. So go ahead and just fire away.
Well, yeah, continuing on just, again, the thing that I cannot stop preaching about, what the Penguins need is their bottom six. However, despite that, I think there's one player on the roster that I do not see a spot for at all. He's currently in the lineup on Sullivan's line. He did not make my lineup, and that's Colton Sevier. He was a throw-in in the Patrick Hornqvist for Mike Matheson trade, and my prediction is that he's going to be moved. And I say moved because I don't even know if I want to say traded. I could see him being put on waivers and just being claimed by another team, or I could even see him just going down to Wilkes-Barre. I don't see a spot for him. He's towards 30. He's a veteran NHL player already, but he's on almost a $2 million contract, and that's not what the Penguins need right now. I didn't hate the Matheson for Hornqvist trade, but the thing I hated the most about it was that Sevier was part of it, because it didn't make any sense to me that you would add just NHL player guy, because that's pretty much what Colton Sevier is. And I'm sorry if you're listening, Colton, but he's pretty much just NHL player guy. He's not phenomenal. He's just a run-of-the-mill bottom six forward for a decent team. And the Penguins are hopefully not a decent team. Hopefully they're a great team. And I don't see a spot for Colton Sevier. So that's my pick there. My first prediction is that Colton Sevier, he'll be the Erica Branson of this year. The Penguins will go like a couple months into the season and be like, what are we doing with this guy? And he'll be either bought out, traded, put on waivers. He won't be bought out. But Drew O'Connor is probably going to take a spot.
And for your next prediction, you have Cody Ceci will not be bad, which is probably my favorite prediction title you have.
Well, yeah. Jack Johnson is gone. That was a glorious, announcement that the Penguins made when they announced that they would be buying him out. Obviously, there's cap penalties for that, but whatever. But we only had about a month of celebration before it was announced that the Penguins signed Cody Ceci to a 1 year, $1 million contract. I really do not like this signing at all. But the thing that I'm happiest about it though is that it's only 1 year. I'll give him a chance. Rachel, I know you don't know much about the NHL, but Cody Ceci is kind of the player that always keeps getting chances, even though he doesn't deserve it. Kind of like Jack Johnson. He's bad. Like Cody Ceci's not good anymore. He was a decent prospect that the Senators drafted, and he just keeps getting chances because, people think that they see that first overall pick that was back then, and he just really isn't. He's terrible in his own end. He can't defend well. He misses the net all the time. Like, he can't hit the net with his shots. But, again, I've never seen him play a game in a Penguin sweater, though, so I will give him a chance, though. But I don't know. I don't think he'll be terrible this season. And the reason I say that is because I think he might be in and out of the lineup, and he might not have a solidified position in the top six. And I think maybe Pierre-Olivier Joseph would take his spot, but I don't know. I don't think he's as bad as Jack Johnson, and I don't think he'll have as much as the blame as Johnson did. So that's kind of what I meant there by he won't be bad. He won't be as noticeably bad as Johnson was.
Got it. So he's the Ashlyn Harris of the NHL. Got it. Okay.
Sure.
You have next up here, and I know enough about the NHL to know that Jared McCann was really good his first year here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Kind of had a lull year last year in terms of consistency.
Yep.
But now you think he's really going to have his breakout year.
Well, this is both a prediction and also a thing that I'm so hopeful for is, again, I've mentioned it before, so I'll kind of go over this prediction really quick. And my prediction is that Jared McCann will have a breakout year. He'll emerge as the Penguins' new third-line center, and he'll contribute with clutch goals that are, needed from a third-line center like we had in years past with Nick Bonino and Jordan Staal on cup teams. Crosby, Malkin, McCann, and Bluger, that's a strong four centers if you look at it, if McCann can develop. And I think I say he's going to have around 35 points, maybe like 15 goals. That'd be phenomenal. And again, those stats are a little bit weird because we're not playing in an 82-game season. So that's around like a 20-goal season in a traditional year because we're only playing 52 games this year.
Right.
And then kind of going off of that, my next prediction I'll just go over really quick. Mark Jankowski, who is currently the Penguins' third-line center, he's not going to stay in the lineup. I'm sorry. I don't know enough about him, and I'm rooting more for Jared McCann than I am for Jankowski. That I don't think Jankowski is going to be the Penguins' third-line center for the majority of the year. He looked good in training camp accordingly, but really he's just a project center for the Penguins. And by that, I mean he is yet another 2012 first-round draft pick that the Penguins have acquired. And it's crazy when you think about how many, or when you actually go and look at the 2020 or at the 2012 first round, which was actually held in Pittsburgh. The NHL draft was held in Pittsburgh. It's crazy to look at how many players have actually played for the Penguins since then, in these 9 years since that. So real quick, going over the names that have played for the Penguins: Tanner Pearson, who was drafted by Los Angeles that year. Mike Matheson, who was on the team right now. Oli Mata played for the Penguins. Of course, he was drafted there. Mark Jankowski is on the roster right now. Cody Ceci is on the roster right now. Derek Pouliot was drafted by the Penguins. Of course, that didn't work out. And then Alex Galchenyuk used to be on the Penguins. So what? That's how many names I just named there? Like 6, 7? That's a lot of failed 2012 first-round picks. I thought that was interesting, though. And I don't think Jankowski is going to really emerge as something that the Penguins can really rely on, because consistency has been an issue with him. He had a career-high 32 points in 2018-19 in 79 games. He's only 26, though. But last year, he had 5 goals and 2 assists. So he went from, a 32-point season to a 7-point season. And it's nice to have that bargain contract because, we're not really risking anything by having him on the team. But I just don't see him happening as a third-line center. I hope I'm wrong, though.
So your next couple predictions are about other teams here in the Penguins group. So you've got one group struggling and another group dominating, and both are
the two biggest rivals for the Penguins.
Yeah, two biggest rivals for the Penguins.
Well, the Philadelphia Flyers and the Washington Capitals, one of these teams will miss the playoffs for the first time in a while. One of these teams will dominate and contend for the President's Trophy as the most points in the regular season. The team that's going to miss the playoffs is the Washington Capitals. The Capitals, they're going to start to feel the signs of fatigue and just age and overall rust that the Penguins have. And even though the Penguins, I think, will make the playoffs this year, again, like they are also feeling the rust from, being able to have those deep postseason runs. I think TJ Oshie's starting to get old and washed up. Tom Wilson's not a good player. I'm sorry. Nick Backstrom, actually, I'm not sorry about that. Tom Wilson's a goon. Nick Backstrom and John Carlson are still getting older, even though John Carlson's super underrated, and I even say that as a Penguins fan. And Ovechkin, again, he's aging, and I don't think he can. Everyone says it every year, though, that they don't think that Ovechkin can keep up that scoring pace, and then he goes on and leads the league in goals. But when you look at the offseason additions that they added to this already aging team, they added Zdeno Chara, who's in his 40s. They added former Penguins Daniel Sprong, Justin Schultz, and Connor Sherry, who are all washed up, used goods, if we're being honest here. I love those guys. They got us some cups, but, the Penguins moved on for them for a reason. And also, Braden Holtby left in the offseason. The Capitals don't have a solidified starter because they added Henrik Lundqvist, another player who's old, and he's not going to play this season because he had open heart surgery, and that's crazy. The fact that not only did he go to Washington, he had a life-altering surgery. And I hate Henrik Lundqvist with a passion, but obviously, this is above hockey, and I wish him all the best and things like that, because I know, of course, Henrik Lundqvist is listening to this podcast. But the thick and thin of it is that the Capitals don't really have a starting goaltender, or a goaltender that has been a starter before. They got Ilya Samsonov, and I think Phoenix Copley is the backup then. And I really just don't see this team overall on paper being as competitive as they were in years past. They could probably win the 2010 Stanley Cup because they got Chara and Lundqvist and Ovechkin, which is a joke that's been run to death. But I think the Capitals missed the playoffs. On the flip side, though, and I'll go over this really quick because I don't like to praise the Flyers, especially on a Penguin or on a Pittsburgh podcast. The Flyers have a good roster. I'll say it. It pains me to say it, but they're going to be good this year. Last year, they went on a streak before the pause. Thankfully, there was a pause, though, and it ruined all their momentum, and they crashed and burned in the playoffs, and Drew didn't have, any points. They have a good roster, though. Konechny, Couturier, Hayes, Provorov, etc., plus another year of Carter Hart. I think the Flyers are going to be good this year. They'll contend for the President's Trophy with the Tampa Bay Lightning. However, and I have to bash the Flyers because, I'm a Yinzer. The Flyers are going to crash and burn in the playoffs, though, and I'm so excited for it to happen. Probably one of my biggest predictions this year, though, or I guess it's kind of for next year. The Flyers are going to crash in the playoffs this year, despite having a phenomenal regular season. And then Claude Giroux is going to be out. He's going to be out, and he's going to have another rough postseason where he doesn't score any points and is not a leader at all. and he's going to be done in Philly. I don't know if he gets traded. I don't know if he maybe even retires. I don't think he'll retire, though. I don't know if he gets bought out, but I think he leaves in the offseason. That's my bold hot take for 2021.
And for the playoffs now, there are 4 East teams that can make the playoffs. Talk about your playoff predictions.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I do have the Penguins making the playoffs despite, I don't know. I'm probably the most critical towards the Penguins that I have ever been now because the Penguins are, getting older and maybe not have that cup window open anymore. And then, of course, Philly, I think I said it will make it. And then Boston will probably make the playoffs. They just have an identity there that they'll make the playoffs. And with Bergeron as captain, and yeah, they'll make the playoffs. The team that is kind of, I guess, a sleeper pick is the New York Rangers, even though a lot of people are picking them to make the East playoffs. Yeah, I got the Rangers making the playoffs. They got a good young core. They got the first overall draft pick. They got 2 young goaltenders that are really good. Not to mention Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad. They make the playoffs. In the next 4 in the division, I have Washington and the Islanders barely missing the East playoffs, and then Buffalo and New Jersey have no chance in this division. This is going to be probably the most wide open division. And then as for the North division, I think the Montreal Canadiens have a really good roster, and I think that the North division is super wide open given the fact that Ottawa is the only bad team in it. So the teams that I have in are the Canadiens, who are going to win the North division with my prediction, and then Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Vancouver are going to make it, which leaves Toronto out. I only kind of just say that because I have I have a spite towards the Leafs and their fan base because they're just super obnoxious. And then the Senators don't make the playoffs as well. And I don't think Calgary is possessing a roster that is worthy of making the playoffs. And then in the Central, that's the division where the Lightning are just going to kill everything. They'll win the President's Trophy. They'll make the playoffs. The Hurricanes will make it, I guess. And then Columbus, Nashville, they're decent teams, but they're not, what you would expect as like a top 4 team in the division. Florida, Minnesota, Chicago, and Detroit missed the playoffs. So they're my picks for the playoffs. Again, it's way too early to figure out, what the division will look like, or what the playoffs will look like in terms of a structure. But right now, I'm going to stick with last year's prediction, who I had for my Cup winner and runner-up. I'm going to say the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup, and the Carolina Hurricanes are the runner-up.
And, last but not least, we've got awards at the end of the season, including who you think is going to make the finale of the NHL not so normal 2021 season.
Yeah, just real quick. And awards are probably the thing that no one can predict except for maybe the Hart Trophy, which it's gonna be either Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, or Connor McDavid, or Leon Draisaitl. So that's pretty much a safe bet there. But for this year's predictions for player awards, I kind of went just off the board. Who knows? Who knows? So for Art Ross, for most points, I have Jack Eichel. I think he's going to tear it up with Taylor Hall and Jeff Skinner as his new line mates, especially Taylor Hall. Don't think the Sabres make the playoffs, though, but I don't know. In a shortened season, Jack Eichel could tear it up. For the Vezina Trophy for best goaltenders, I have a bounce-back season from Sergei Bobrovsky. There's kind of an ongoing joke that Bobrovsky has one good season and then one just awful season. Bobrovsky had one of those awful seasons last year. I think he wins the Vezina. I don't know if the Panthers make the playoffs, though. The Norris, I'm giving it to Brett Pesce. He's an underrated defenseman. A lot of players in Carolina are underrated, and I think he gets some recognition there with the Norris this year. Hart Trophy, I'm giving it to Nathan McKinnon. He is what the definition of a valuable player is, especially last year when, Landeskog and Rantanen went down. McKinnon is probably going to win the Hart, if not this year, but definitely in his career. Calder, I'm going completely off the board here and picking Ryan Poehling for Montreal. Montreal has so many good prospects that are NHL ready, and heck, you never know with the Calder. I could have said Alexis Lafreniere just as a safe bet, but I want to go crazy. I'll say Ryan Poehling. And then the Penguins are going to have a major award winner this year. and it's going to be Jake Gensel, and he's going to win the Rocket Richard, which is going to be crazy. The Rocket Richard, of course, being the reward that has the most goals in the season. The only other Penguins to win it was, I think, Crosby won it his rookie season, and then Malkin won it in 2011, 2012 when Crosby was hurt. In a shortened season, playing fully healthy with Sidney Crosby and maybe Brian Rust or Kasperi Kapanen or Jason Zucker, Jake Gensel is going to light it up, and he's going to win the most goals in the season. It's going to be close. Ovechkin will obviously be up there, but Kucherov's not in there this year. Heck, you never know. A lot of people are picking Kyle Connor, but yeah, again, I'm just going screw it with my picks this year, and I got Jake Gensel. So those are my overall picks. Again, my cup predictions are going to be the same as last year. I'm going to have Carolina losing to Colorado. Overall, I don't see the Penguins making it far in the playoffs, sadly. But yeah, that's pretty much my overall predictions for the 2021 NHL season.
Good stuff on all fronts. I think you covered a lot of bases tonight, so it seems a little empty to say, but is just in general, anything else you want to add about the upcoming season that kicks off? Time of recording, it kicks off tomorrow, but
yeah,
when everybody hears this, it's going to be today.
I'll just say 3 words, is that I'm really excited, like more excited than I've been for a long time to just watch hockey. And I think that, of course, has to do with the fact that, we're not having a traditional off season and then a traditional season. And then, of course, COVID's going to last. Even if it's magically gone tomorrow, it's still going to have effects that are going to, be throughout our entire lives. So I don't know. It's pretty much just, I love the Penguins, and I'm going to be excited for a season no matter what. And this season's I'm really excited for, especially the fact that I'm going to be doing Penguins fan reactions after every game, a la Steve Dangle, on my YouTube channel. So check that out. My username on YouTube is just Owen Krepps as well.
Well, good stuff there. And to kind of close out the show, it seems kind of weird just closing it off when it's always weird when it's just two people, because I always feel like there's somebody else that has something to say. But Owen's YouTube channel, be sure to check that out. He puts a lot of his videos and his articles, but definitely check that out. You can follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Castle. We will be, sharing all kinds of content and stuff with the Penguin season coming back. Cody has his Twitter page, Let's Talk Pitt, with just one T. I'm on Twitter at Rachael Kriger. And just remember that the PGH Sports Castle podcast, we're on all major platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Definitely be sure to check us out by searching our name. We're also on Google Podcasts, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, and Spreaker, where we record our shows. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And your feedback is super important for us. Any reviews posted will help make the podcast more visible to prospective listeners. And if you ever have any ideas for prompts or topics or whatnot, feel free to reach out to members of our team and the PGH Sports Castle Twitter to send some ideas along. If you haven't watched it yet, to kind of give a little lighthearted end to a weird Steelers season, if you follow along with 96.1 Kiss, their morning show, they always do like Facebook comments and stuff, and I listen to it every once in a while while I'm at work, and the Steelers Facebook comments were absolutely hilarious.
Any Facebook comments from any professional sports teams are always hilarious. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they were so ridiculously funny, and Mikey and Big Bob are two, like Pittsburgh icons basically, and they were so funny. So it was a weird end to the season.
Yeah, I'm planning on doing.
If you want,
I'm planning on doing a video of that too, because really this year is the only year of NFL football that I have watched start to finish, and try to become more of an NFL fan. So I want to give my thoughts just pretty much on what it was like coming from the NHL, of course.
And I just realized Fubo TV, which I have, has NHL games. If I get the chance, I will try to pop in.
Yeah, you got a shortened season
and watch a game or two.
I'm gonna try and watch the Riverhounds this year.
There you go. See, we'll do a trade-off.
Exactly.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we will catch y'all next time.